Good evening, everyone looking from afar. This is a quarterly workshop that we have tonight. We have several things, and we have a couple of new formal items we'll need to vote on, but it is Tuesday, July 20th. Everyone on council is present. I will call this meeting to order. Ms. Chapman, are there any public comments?
No public comments.
There are no public comments. Public comment is closed. Next are our workshop items. We have three. We have May River Road Pocket Park, Stormwater Extent of Service, Public Meeting Protocol. Brian.
Hello, good evening.
You're up. And I apologize for eating lunch. While Brian's doing that, just since Stephen's not new anymore, it's really not formal up here, and we all ask questions, and usually if the public's here, we let the public chime in after all of council's asked questions. So,
okay.
Brian.
All right, so the May River Road Pocket Park update. I just want to start off, remind you where the location is. It's located on May River Road across from downtown Delhi, Dollar General area, adjacent to Stock Farm. Here's an aerial view of the park. You can see a lot of the improvements have been installed already with the May River Road streetscape. We have some benches, palm trees, trash cans, lighting, etc. Here's another angle just from, I guess, orthometric view. You can kind of see how it ties in with that path to the left into Stock Farm. The items that we've already installed with the streetscape construction. So a little history about this project. Town Council approved this in 2017 as part of the May River Road streetscape. There's a donation made by Mayberry Holdings for 0.3 acres for a pocket park. The donation agreement stated that the grantee shall construct landscaping, irrigation, hardscape, fencing, a pedestrian mall area with benches, structural improvements, and/or visual enhancements. And it references this exhibit right here. So again, let's see if I don't. Some of these items you can see that are shown on the concept plan, we've already installed those, but other items such as this brick edge wall along the back, this seating area, this plaza kind of area, we have not constructed that. And that's kind of what I wanted to show you tonight. So again, we've constructed many of these items already. With the FY22 budget, council approved $141,000 for this pocket park. $15,000 of that was to come up with the actual construction documents, and $126,000 was for construction. During the budget meeting, council asked us to investigate and maybe do a little value engineering on that cost to see if we could come up with some reductions in the price. So what we did was we got with our landscape planner, and we came up with this drawing. This will be concept A, I'll call it. We reduced the amount of plantings, we reduced the amount of benches, we shifted the plaza to the west away from the adjacent property line, and we added a sidewalk connector from Stock Farm in the middle of the park to the sidewalk, and that was at request from Mr. McCracken. And so this kind of highlights, I know it's hard to tell, but the items in red are what we removed or shifted, and the item in green is what we've added. So again, you can see the sidewalk kind of in the middle. We've reduced some palm trees, some shrubs, kind of the scope of that plaza to the east. That's one option. Another option, we've reduced even more. We took away the plaza altogether. We've eliminated that brick edge between the plantings and the side. And we've kept that center walkway. And so we've added another walkway, just a connection to the east. So again, what's in green is what we've added, and what's in red is what we've taken away. Just concepts. This isn't approved, and this is what we want to talk about tonight. Just some imagery. These are kind of the thoughts we were thinking. You know, it's typical with some of the streetscaping projects that we do with the ground cover, the brick edging, the tabby sidewalk. You can see the site furnishings that are already out there. We'd match our benches and trash cans and planters and items that we already use in other projects. So the reduction in this, if we went with that item A, we reduced the construction cost down to about $120,000. If we went to the really scaled down option B, our estimate is $57,000. So you can see it's quite a significant drop, especially if we go to option B. So tonight, just wanted to talk to you all about that, see what you thought, if any of those options appeal to you, or if you wanted to add or remove any more. Thoughts. And then after this, we'll make sure it conveys with the donation agreement. We'll take it back to Mr. Marks, who donated the property, and Mr. McCracken get their input, but basically move forward with construction drawings and start construction in the spring. So I'm happy to go back to any of those.
Questions from Brian or thoughts on which one?
Here's the original. Again, this is the approved, well, the one that's in the donation agreement.
Brian, can you tell us costs of each different concept?
Sure. Again. Right here, the adopted budget, the construction is $126,000 for the one that was in the donation agreement. The one that has that first scale down, removing the plantings, reducing some of the brick wall was $119,000, so really only about $7,000 in savings. The one that gets rid of the plaza altogether and removes that brick edging altogether is $57,000.
Stuff from brick wall?
I don't know about the community. The original donation agreement included the one that's $126,000. That was what was, I guess, agreed upon or part of that original agreement. So I would say that is what they want. Not speaking for the entire community, but the.
Probably late now, but I think we should.
I talked to Emmett yesterday, and he was unsure of our public comment process. So the POA, I said, you need to get with Kim, get the POA president to provide input. I said, but do you want to tell me? Because I'm happy to relay it. It's not coming from his mouth. He just wanted to ensure, both he and the POA president wanted to ensure the two sidewalks could connect. They stop, and then there's grass, and then there's our sidewalk. And his hope was that we would connect to that. And I did tell him, I said, this is, to me, extremely high for a park that's not a park. Kids aren't going to be playing kickball. There's no fence. Donation, did it. So he wanted that, he was very, very focused on the two sidewalks. So, which to me, I like the number of your last plan, but that was from him.
My only question would be, in our agreement that we agreed to when we took it as a donation, it kind of describes the first one in that.
Correct.
So legally, I mean, I guess it's a legal question whether we have to do what we said we were going to do or what we agreed to do or something less than that.
My recollection was that that was a conceptual plan.
The wording in the italics is straight from the agreement. Conceptual plan, but it outlines the things that are shown on that conceptual
But
plan.
is a pedestrian mall area, isn't that very vague? Couldn't that be a grassy meadow? I don't know what a pedestrian mall area
This plan
even
does
is.
not have doesn't have the sidewalks. I think we could argue successfully that in Plan B, you have both sidewalks joining, right?
Yes, correct.
Sidewalks would sufficiently cover the removal of the pedestrian plaza, as Brian has called it.
How about the, where it says benches and Plan B doesn't show any benches? Right? I mean,
We've removed the benches. Technically, I think we've added the benches as part of the streetscape project. I mean, it serves the pocket park itself.
I mean, I'm okay with whatever y'all get them to agree. I just, we just got to make sure we do something close to what we said we were going to
Right
do.
there, it's showing those benches, the trash cans, the palm trees. We've already installed those. The bench in question would be back here.
I personally be in favor of the original conceptual plan, and in respect to what Councilman Toomer said, I think if that was the vision or the understanding of the May River Holding Company that donated that property, I would like to see us continue with in that path or that direction.
Y'all have an option that,
Well, I'm just curious about your comments. It sounds like they want, we know that Emmett mentions the sidewalks. That's not part of this original plan.
Just it would connect sidewalk that kind of comes into the plaza. But that middle connection, no, it does not show on this.
I guess my point is, I wonder if there's not some weakened down, maybe Plan B, which is somewhat of a compromise with the sidewalks connecting.
Option B, if you would, please, Brian.
Sidewalks.
Instead of the plaza. I think I would suggest to council that perhaps instructions to Brian is for him to show option A and option B to the POA and see if they are fine with option B. If they're fine with option B, then give him the authority to go forward with that. Does that make sense?
Well, Terry, I think, well, I want to be sure. When we gave the option A, was that our concept, or was that something that the holding company said?
Are you talking about this one right here? It was a combination of adding several things, adding what they've asked for, which was that center connection, and also looking at what you guys asked us to do, which was look at reducing the cost. So it was a little bit of both. I would say it accomplishes both things. It reduced the cost, not by a lot, $7,000, but it also provided that center connection.
15,000 for planning.
To actually come up with a construction drawing based on this exhibit. Because there's quite a grade difference between the sidewalk and the grass. And so just to come up with something that could be constructed.
That plan will work on either of the three designs.
We would use that 15,000 to pay for either of those, yes.
a question, if everyone's asked, it's, yes, the mom in me says, well, let's just give the donation back because we've improved it and we've grassed it. And with that fence, there's so much vegetation. And I went there again yesterday after Emmett called me because I didn't remember a second sidewalk that really went to nowhere. And it's so landscaped. You've done a beautiful job. And by the way, your planters are much prettier than they were before. I guess the rain made plants grow. So thank you. But I don't think you need to add more landscape. I think just to take it off of your lane, let's keep these trees in the buffer where they need to be and not tear those down. Because the building that's being built now, they and the building on the corner, they were allowed to take trees out of their buffer, which are plants that we're replanting to replace maybe some trees that stay there. And I know that's not your world. I like option B. I like saving cost. It's not a park place. I mean, it's not even a park of any size that's going to cause anybody to do anything but sit down, or now they can drive their golf cart up the road to get on the sidewalk to get to Hayward Street. So I like option B, and I'd like, maybe y'all should take it back if you don't like what we're doing, things that really were not planned on being done. So you've got all three, you've got all different suggestions.
Option B for me too.
I do have another question. So the property of this pocket park was donated and owned by the town now, right? So the reason to go back to the POA is just out of a courtesy to them and not a necessity?
Well, it wasn't the POA that donated it. It was
Right,
a
that's what I-
developer.
No, I understand it, but I'm saying now the conversation, I heard people saying take option A and B to the POA and get their consensus. I'm asking, are we doing that out of courtesy because it's not a necessity, right?
Fred asked that, so I would think it's more of a courtesy, but And I'm not in the POA, so I don't live in that POA, even though I live on Stock Farm Road.
So Bridget, why I asked it, Bridget, I was leading up to something. I wanted to find out who concept it was first. POA, on all that, then it would have more weight to me. But if it's something that, like Lisa said, it's something that we just trying, lack of a better word, we were given something that somebody else didn't want to do.
I think option B was our closest to reducing the cost as much as possible, but also providing what was asked of us to provide, which is the 2 sidewalk connections. That didn't necessarily come exactly from the POA, but it came from Mr. McCracken. And
The
You
original,
heard what I was told.
the original donation included his own concept plan, didn't it? I think so. I think in one of the emails, I mean, I may be wrong, one of the emails that he had sent to me some months ago, I think he had Josh Tiller do a design.
And this comes from J.K. Tiller, so they've worked with us on this, but whatever was part of that agreement was what was agreed to, the donation agreement. So that first thing.
Where we are right this moment is go back and give them an option. They can choose. You either get the sidewalks or you take the original concept or whatever, choice is yours.
For us making a decision tonight, I'd only ask for that clarification for just to get to the point of, I think we could make that decision here. I know there's a lot of times when issues like that come up and if Brian has done his due diligence, it gets volleyed back for more options and then things get delayed. So I think whatever the majority agrees on, sounds like it's B. We do that and then, they can move forward with it.
The workshop item, do you feel you have consensus? I don't think it's something it's not a formal item, so we can't vote on it, but we can each kind of say our thoughts, I guess, and then you get a feel.
Right now, the thing I'm hearing is option B.
I like B.
Budget.
Yeah, let's do B and see if we get away with it. If they come back with a legitimate complaint, then we'll have to add whatever it is later, I guess. A lot of difference in the money, 75,000.
That's the input you were looking for?
Yes, 100%.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to talk about with this?
But the planners really, do you think the planners look better? Because you saw them too.
By the way, wow, they look tremendous. They're wonderful, and they're eye-popping. So whoever put all those beautiful flowers in every single one of them, I mean, wow.
I can just Derek Coaxum.
Well, you tell just
thanks to
Derek
him. I'm not sure who
he's
he
got
had
a
to-
green thumb.
I'm not
He
sure.
needs to quit and do that full
He can't do
time.
it, he tells somebody
Yeah,
else.
he tells
He's
somebody
an
else.
arborist, and he now is a master gardener. Let's put him through that school. Okay, are you stormwater extent of service and level of
Yes.
service?
Yeah. Okay, so the next item is stormwater extent of service and level of service. If you can remember back to October, at one of our quarterly workshops, we gave you an overview of our drainage program. We talked about a brief overview of the level of service between the Department of Transportation, Beaufort County, and the town. We talked about some of our small drainage projects, CIP projects. We kind of gave you an update on some drainage concerns that we had received, such as Drayson Circle. I think this predated some of the concerns from last week with the farm. We talked about our new stormwater project manager, Dan Ryback. I know he's worked probably more with Councilman Hamilton than any of you all, but he's been a great help so far, a great addition. And during that workshop, we talked about our next steps. And the item that's highlighted there is our drainage policy development. We don't really have a formal extent of service, level of service document. And what that means is the extent of service is those items, what are we responsible for? How far reaching do we want to go? And then level of service, how often do we want to perform the maintenance or perform inspections on those items? And obviously, the more we take on, the harder it is to maintain that level of service. So this is a little exhibit that we came up with. I know it's a little hard to follow, but basically right now, We would be responsible for anything that's within this town of Bluffton public right-of-way. So imagine a storm inlet, a culvert, roadside ditches. That would be what we are responsible for if it's in our right-of-way. So think of Pritchard Street right out here. If there's an inlet or a roadside ditch, we would be responsible for the maintenance and operations of that infrastructure. As the stormwater flows out of the inlet and goes across private property, we would only be responsible for what's within that public drainage easement if it was conveyed to us. Right now, we really don't have a lot of easements that are conveyed to us. It's something that we had talked about specifically with the project on Buck Island Road as it drains through Mr. Brown's property, and I have an exhibit here I'll show you. We don't have an easement over that, but that would be something, if we acquired that easement, we would be responsible for that channel until the ultimate outfall or until the easement ended. So again, you can see where, if the easement ended here, then this would be private. Private detention pond, ponding on private property, that is up to the property owner. So this is where we, again, go back to the farm. Since it's a recent thing, the ponding and the flooding that's in their development, that would be their responsibility, not the town's.
A question on that backside. I'm all over this place, so I saw it going on Buck Island. You have right here private driveway culvert within the town of Bluffton right away. Put in the town right away. If it's put in anywhere, do you have to have notification and approval of what the culvert looks like? And you know where I'm talking about, don't you?
I don't know what you're talking about, but yes, that's something that's come up quite a bit. So there are many driveways that have been put in without either an SCDOT encroachment permit or a town encroachment permit. Haven't refused service on those, but technically we could. So we should only be responsible for what we've approved. So let's say you have a roadside ditch and it requires a 15-inch pipe and somebody only puts an 8-inch pipe, then that's going to constrict flow, it's going to cause problem. Well, if they didn't get an encroachment permit, technically we could rip it out.
I was going to ask that. So what do we do? Can we make them
Since
put
the
it
town
with the
doesn't
right
have-
one, or can't condemn it, I guess, but can we
Yeah.
close off the roads?
Since the town doesn't have that many actual roads and then thus driveway culverts, we'd probably go talk to the owner and figure out what's going on and put in something that would work. But like Pritchard Street, for example, many of these have been put in without SCDOT encroachment permits, and then we took the street over, and now we're facing that problem where you have a driveway that's kind of impeding flow of the flow line along the edge of the road. So that is a problem. So
What would our recourse be on a road? Because any roads we own, they're going to be owned by someone else in the past. So what do we do with, and I'm not picking on Pritchard, but.
most likely we would go talk to the property owner and come up with a proper solution. Like it shouldn't be under, I think the DOT requires 15-inch culvert, 12 at minimum, 12-inch, but.
I know when during Matthew, we walked, you and me and
Grayson Circle.
Grayson Circle, and that was you noticed it right off the bat. And maybe they were right at the time, but they had, there were metal and grass had grown in them. And I think about that a lot, especially when I'm on Buck Island. And Buck Island's where I'm talking about, where on a Saturday morning, it was put in, and it wasn't a concrete pipe. And then I go down to where the flooding is at that neighbor who's a resident, and I think, here we go again.
And that would be a DOT road, and so it depends. DOT will allow a corrugated metal pipe, I'm pretty sure, as a driveway culvert. But again, if they got their encroachment permit, then they're good. Then it's been sized correctly and they've approved it, and it shouldn't be a problem. And the DOT should maintain that. But otherwise, they probably won't maintain it.
DOT doesn't maintain.
Because it's an illegal encroachment.
Thank you.
So this kind of goes back to that map. What we would like to bring to you for our maintenance responsibilities are any pipe systems that are within the town right-of-way or a town easement. Any private ditch or channel, as long as it has a permanent easement dedicated to the town that accepts runoff from a public street, from either a county road or a DOT road. And I'll show you some examples here in a second. Grayson Circle is going to be like my example for that. And then any private ditch or system that has a permanent easement that may help benefit the town from either flood reduction or water quality improvement. And I'm thinking this will be more from like CIP projects that come from the May River Watershed Action Plan update. Anything that we do as part of that, as long as we get an easement for it, we would maintain that in perpetuity. Just show you a couple examples. Grayson Circle. It's a DOT-owned road, so the water drains through this ditch right here and this ditch right here. Neither of those have easements on it. The county doesn't have an easement. SCDOT doesn't have an easement, but it is taking runoff from a public road. So that would be something, if you told us, yes, go out and get easements for that, we would then maintain that in perpetuity. The ultimate outfall of this channel is back here. The county has an easement over it. So it's just, we're really just talking about this little strip that takes runoff from a public road. This exhibit over here, again, is Buck Island Road. You can see this is where it crosses, but this is where that red line is where it drains. So to maintain that system and maintain those improvements that we're putting on Buck Island Road to make sure it flows to an adequate outfall, we would need easements over those 15 properties to either construct a ditch or maintain it so the water flows permanently, so we can keep it clean. After a hurricane, go in there and clean it out. Right now, we have no real authority to go in on private property and clean that channel out.
You're talking about where it goes through Boston Browns and back through Cahill and on back there.
Then a level of service, again, that's just the frequency which we go out and we keep our assets maintained. Usually we look at things within a 5-year span. This chart right here kind of shows what DOT, Beaufort County, and we do. We try to mow roadside ditches on a biweekly basis. Other ditches, main ditches such as Tower Ditch, we do those 3 times a year. Cleaning out culverts or other pipes, we'll do it once every 5 years or as it's needed. If we find there's a blockage, we'll obviously take care of it. And then ditches, like re-excavating them, rebuilding them once every 10 years.
Go back to Boston Brown property. The drainage was also affected by Vista View. So, and that development didn't, property where Buck Island used to drain to Vista View and back to the Cove and back to the May River.
Oh, thank you. I didn't know what we were looking
And are
at.
you talking about that
Hallmark.
culvert that's under the road? I think that's Hagler Drive, Hagler Boulevard. So 3 years ago when Matthew Carey was here, he was in our watershed management department. We went out and inspected the length of that entire ditch. We found 2 crossings of that road that needed help. And so we notified the property owner and just said, under our stormwater ordinance, you're allowing an issue that could potentially block water and prevent flow. And we sent a letter to them. They took care of it as best they could. But if we had an easement over all that, then we could go out there anytime we wanted and clean that out. We could keep it maintained on a level of service basis that I just showed you.
Doesn't that run into Beaufort County though, right?
Yeah.
Some is town and some is
It is.
not.
I think what's
Yeah, Hallmark is town, Vista View isn't.
Oh, I thought the pink line meant town limits. Am I not
Hagler.
right?
Boulevard.
Is county, correct?
Yeah.
Hagler Boulevard
Hagler
is a
is-
county.
Right.
Yeah, anything that's, it doesn't show up on the TV screen, but on my computer, the town limits basically run along that red line right there.
Oh, okay. Isn't that the little pink?
Some of the
Isn't
pink
that in
stripe,
the
yeah.
town?
I know it's hard to see on the screen.
No, but it's a pale pink stripe. Isn't that town property? And then the non-striped, isn't that county property? Do you not see the pink stripes like I do?
So yes,
see
the
'em.
pale pink would be county, and then the darker red, it's so hard to see, especially at this scale.
Oh,
This is
okay.
just meant for a,
Well, the pink's in town and county. Stripes.
yes, that's town. That's town.
So the pale pink background is
This-
town.
This property right here, that's in the county.
Oh, it's in the county.
Over here are in the town.
Oh, the colors, yeah, so it's a pink and then a
Darker red.
rusty
Yeah.
pink. Okay, okay.
Color, Lisa, rusty pink.
Kind
That's
of a
really
rusty,
close to the same thing in
rosy.
my glasses.
So, yeah, I didn't see the difference until he highlighted it, but
So that's
get your
basically
question
it.
answered?
Well, almost, but what do we do to avoid not having easement when there's a main waterway or that's important to drain water? So it's not a easement that anybody claims.
Correct. There is no easement on any of these properties right now. So right now, the town cannot go out there and maintain that. If you direct us, say, yes, this is something we want you to do, we want you to go out and get easements that drain public roads or benefit the community, then Dan Ryback would go out there. We'll start pursuing easements, but we would be responsible for, for the maintenance of that.
Well, okay, and I understand that, but the reason why we may have some of this problem is because years ago, nobody claimed the drainage.
It would just be, not that nobody claimed it, it would just be, I have a ditch on my property, and it is what it is. Like, you wouldn't even think about it. It's just, there's my ditch. And as long as your property flowed, you probably wouldn't think about it at all. And if your neighbor flooded, but we don't want anybody to flood. So that's why if we could get an easement over all of that, it would prevent that.
That's what you want to do.
That's what I'm asking, if you want us to go do that.
Well, I know how hard it is to get easements, and we have a list of what we have to get now, but also some easements are better than none. Wonder if you can't get all these easements, does it help us or hurt us?
All or to make it.
Ideally, you would want to get them all.
And it's also a lot of money involved as far as work and equipment, special equipment to get back in that swamp.
Yeah,
I don't even
we'd
know.
have to create a work shelf to be able to access it and go along the ditch and maintain it.
Probably some different equipment or whatever to get back in that.
These aren't the only two.
No,
These are two.
These are two
hot
examples.
top
These are,
huts.
yeah. The one on this one in particular, I mean, that's been going on for quite a bit, and we're getting ready to upgrade those pipes that go under Buck Island Road. I know that outfall channel, at least to a point, needs to be improved. If we could get it to an adequate channel that doesn't need a lot of work, maybe that's where we stop our easement. But at the immediate outfall, it needs work. If you drive by and look at it, there are a lot of trees that are down. And
Can you point to where that is?
Way off the mark here, but kind of the same problem that the farmers having?
Kinda.
the farm, I don't have an example of it. I don't have a picture of it. There's a crossing in the farm where there's probably over 1,000 acres that drain through a wetland that come down, crosses a road. There's no issue there. The next road it crosses, that's where the issue's happening. And the last time I saw it, the water was too high to see what's going on. We're supposed to have a meeting either late this week or early next week to go out and look at it. Either the culvert under the road is undersized or it was blocked. Who knows? You know, when you get 6 inches of rain, something falls, it blocks that pipe. There you go. But I think that's the issue. And then all of that drains into a bunch of stormwater ponds that then go into Hampton Hall, and then it ultimately goes to the outfall. So it's a big system that are interconnected.
Something we have some responsibility to make sure that it drains?
Up to you. It does, water flows through town of Bluffton property through our wetlands that we have adjacent to the farm. But that part was flowing fine. There was no standing water on the towns. I don't believe we're causing any issue. I think it's within there.
Not us, but
I don't know if, I think it predated when we reviewed, I think the county.
parallel run of piping from what I remember that meeting in 2017. It actually ties into one pipe, the exit pipe, where it all flows out of. So it's like,
So you have your drainage system that's on the road, and then you have the wetland system that's beside it, and then it all ends up going into one pipe and one pond.
Interesting to
And
see
so it
your
all
work-
joins together, and that's,
Well, maybe we should hear your workshop results and when you can see when it's dry and do that. Because I'm told by residents here, they have the money, they just want to know what to do. Now, this isn't the entire farm, and I don't mean it. Have the money to do it, we just need to know what to do. And I said, well, who is that man from Somerville that didn't say what business he was with?
yeah, I'm not sure
Maybe
about
he
that.
needs to come figure out to tell them.
Maybe an engineer needs to look at it and
I
tell
think they should
everybody what
contact their
needs to be
engineer of
done.
record.
That might be who it is. Okay, guys,
As
what,
much as you can, Brian, guide them.
Right, and we'll facilitate that as much as we can, without overstepping our bounds of telling them what to do, you know, that then it gets a little tricky. But if you didn't have any questions, this is kind of the path we're going. We, next step, we wanted to actually have something for you all to adopt, a formal document that you can adopt by resolution, probably next month or September. Yeah, it'd be September. August agenda. But unless you had any,
anyone have any issues with this, knowing this is a yeoman's task and Brian needs our help with who we know to explain, because it is hard to understand. We're not big government taking land, but we've got to help our residents as best we can with drainage and ghost roads and everything, and he does need our help. So if you can pull us in on who we can help you with, I think we need to do that.
Can this be done, Brian, for the areas that we know are problems, you know, existing problems, without taking and saying, okay, this is our policy, and, you know, we start getting 100 phone calls from other people saying, I want you cleaned his ditch out, I want mine cleaned out. You know, I could see that we may get a little overwhelmed once the policy says, okay, we're gonna clean everybody's ditches, so to
by
speak.
limiting it right here. Basically, it's if it's in the town right of way, if it drains a public road, or if it helps us alleviate something for the greater good, or it's a capital project. Other than that, like, we're not going into private communities to
But like,
form our life of mine.
like Drayson Circle, though, that it is a public road.
But yeah, it is a public road, so, right, so that would qualify.
Everything's got somewhat of a public road. or
Everything's
maybe
a-
not
By
everything.
public road, I mean owned by DOT, the county, or the town. Not open to not open for anybody to drive across, because it still could be a privately owned road.
Like Bluffton, well, I don't know exactly, Pine Ridge, there's just one. That's not it's a public road, but it's not owned by the county, state, or town.
So it'd be
right?
correct. So it'd
That would be
considered-
their responsibility. Okay, I'm fine with
But I
that.
do see what you're saying,
Yeah.
because
Well, I think
people
we
are
could
already asking
overwhelm.
us to do, clean out ditches, so I think it's the
We
right.
continue to work with, the county. They've been great, and DOT, helpful to help us dig out, roadside ditches on their own.
Are you like Larry said, are you thinking of 1, 2, or 3 projects to
The big ones,
highlight, these two?
kind of those two to start.
Okay,
That's why I
that's
showed them.
simple, I mean,
No, it's major.
major, but at least it's not
Be a
100.
great accomplishment if you can get that
Another
done.
example could be, and this is really throwing it out there, there's no issue yet, but that cove that goes up to Bruin Road, and we have those double culverts that come under Bruin Road. There's no easement over that channel. And I don't know where the cove officially stops, but there's no easement. So if something really bad happened to that channel, it would be the property owner. So that might be something that we want to look at and be like, hey, we want to make sure this thing, it conveys so much public water. We want to get easement over it so we can always go in and maintain it in case a tree falls down. We can get it out of there. I remember there was one in Verdier Cove when I
Verdier
first
Cove,
started.
right.
And we didn't have an easement. We had no way of going about doing anything, so it would have been trespassing. But
The school road, the school loop, what's the name of that? By the high school and back around?
McCracken Circle.
Master's Way. I mean, McCracken Circle.
McCracken Circle, that's
That's a county-owned road.
But we would try to figure out how to get the water off it too, right? I mean,
I have
wouldn't we?
not heard a complaint about that in a while. I think the county took care of it. They
okay.
raised and elevated the road so it would drain properly.
Oh,
I haven't
okay.
heard a complaint.
I knew there was an issue there many times before.
But that's an example.
Right. We would be opening ourselves up to take care of that too.
Yes.
Brian, in your mind, when you say the word easement, to acquire an easement, a lot of times facilitates cost. Purchase the easement. Is that what you're thinking here?
Try to work with the resident to show the benefit of donating that easement for the greater good. But if it was something that became a significant issue that we had to acquire to alleviate flooding, I think we would either.
Okay, and then the word encroachment. I've had easements, I've had encroachment permits. What's the difference?
So an easement would be something across private property that we would be able to maintain. Encroachment is someone building something into the town's right of way. So they're encroaching into the town's right of way. You're placing something into a public right of way, basically. That would be the encroachment.
Plus,
So does anyone have comments to Brian on this? Is he on track? Should he move forward in September, or is anyone against it?
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
Cool, thank you.
I actually liked your graph. It made a lot of sense.
Oh, I'm fighting you.
Okay, public meeting protocol. Mr. Stees, how are you?
Good afternoon. I put a copy of a memorandum in front of each of your spaces just to kind of go through talking about reopening the council meetings to public and some potential phases and timeframes. So I wanted to get council's input on that as we look to make a decision for the August 10th council meeting. So just to go through a little bit, if you look, phase one would be limited really to those that are addressing or presenting to council. So those would be limited to people who would come in for public comment. For those, like last month when Rob made his presentation on the bike ped master plan, any council members or any like that that were here to make presentation probably would have been, as well as the two representatives from Dominion and Palmetto Electric that was here to address their franchise agreements. The goal would be is once they complete that task, they would be asked to leave. So it would be limited to whoever staff, and as they filter out, would limit the number of participants that would be in here. Phase two would be opening more up to the public, which would be limiting to 50% capacity. It would also include any items that are underneath phase one. It could also be required, make a determination whether we want to require face coverings or not for each of that phase, for those that attend. For phase three, that would be full capacity, and then phase four would be pretty much pre-pandemic. There's not a time frame associated with any of these. This could be a year process, it could be a 6-month process. A lot of it just depends on what continues to happen with the unknown variables of COVID. I will share, Kim reached out to the other towns within the county to find out what they were doing. City of Hardeeville is no limits on attendance. Port Royal's no limits on attendance. Town of Hilton Head is a little over 50% capacity. They have a room that holds 180. They allow 80 for the public and hold 20 for council staff and their deputy. And then City of Beaufort is where we would be at with phase one. They're allowing the public in for public comment. They also provide a Zoom option if the public does not want to be present for public comment. So what we would be looking to go to in August would be phase one, which would be similar to what Beaufort has, and still below what the other 3 municipalities within the county are looking at. Based on some of the conversation I saw go back and forth with council, I felt this was something that kind of compromised between where council's discussion was going. So I present to you, and if you have any questions, concerns, comments, that's what we're here to address.
I have a concern. Thank you. I like the consideration that went into beginning the opening back in phases. Seeing that we have the mask ordinances gone away with, and as we welcome the public back in, since that's still a choice, can we propose also having those who come in who don't want to wear the mask, for instance, being able to do the temperature checks that we were doing before? Only concern is because there are areas where there is an increase going back with spikes of those who are contracting it, and just as a safety thing for everyone involved, including us, staff, and their families, I definitely see people not wanting to do the mask anymore, but may be inclined to, just that temper a little.
I don't
for a
think that would
temperature
be
check.
an unreasonable thing, no, ma'am. And actually, when I talked to Lee, where'd he go? There, that was one of the questions he raised, if we wanted to ask that, and that's why we wanted to wait until we heard what the comments were tonight, and then we would make any tweaks or finalize anything that we would need to prepare for any changes that came.
Thank you.
Is anyone tying what they allowed, in your stages to the incident ratio?
Not that I've seen, no, sir.
Because it seems to me that, we went from a high to a medium, and we crossed over to the low here, a month or two ago? And then now we just, as of noted today in the paper, we just slipped back into the moderate level, on the lower level, but still, we slipped from over 51 to 54. So I would think that an indication of the public, how many are being infected at a given time. So I would think that, I don't know how that doesn't play into any decision-making. For example, you wouldn't do any of this if you have a high ratio.
Correct. And as outlined in here, and I don't know if I said it or not, but the goal would be, depending on how things trend, we can go up or down within the tiers. So if we decide to go to phase 1 and then we start going back up within the mid-range and we start getting higher, we can always go back. We have everything we need to go back to the closed meetings. If we start working our way down and we get to phase 2 and all of a sudden things trend up, we can drop back to phase 1. So there's nothing to say that we're going to only go forward. We can move within the plan whichever way we need to. And I think looking at case numbers and council's willingness and stuff like that would be some factors to take into that. As in tying it in and saying we're only going to do, phase 1 if we're medium or below, that's something we can consider. But if we're only going to do phase 1 when we hit low, we'll never make it to any other phase. So there's some things, that you would want to tie within that, because is it going to be moderate, we're good with phase 1 and 2, or moderate, we're good, or if it's low, we're good with 4 and 3, but if it's moderate, we're good with 2, and if it's high, we're only good with 1. So, there's some things that you would have, to me, I think that's just a judgment that we would look at what's going on. And, we have Lee here to help. He's been handling a lot of the COVID, and he can provide guidance on that, and he tracks the case numbers and vaccination rates and all that.
Well, that's my whole point. And
Yeah.
that's the question is, you get to certain levels, it should be a tripwire, Now, we haven't identified for us, and I don't know Lee, what does it go to in moderate? 51 to what?
But I think he was asking, the high range starts at 200?
200 and above.
So my question would be, moving from level to level would be decided by y'all or us?
So that decision, I mean, would rest within us, and that's why as a workshop item, we're asking for council's input as we make that decision, as we prepare for August, to make sure that what we're looking to do is something that council can support.
I mean, the other, not this original stage one, but when
Moving from others,
into stage 2 or 3 or whatever, would that be
so, I
your
mean,
decision?
I would say that's a decision that lies within my purview, but I think if we were looking to change that, that would be something that we would want to
Everybody could put their input in.
put their input and make sure we feel comfortable. And, you know, I made the comment after the last meeting and talking to one of the council members, I hate to sacrifice 2 or 3 of y'all in person versus 14 in person. So there's a balancing act somewhere in there. So, you know, I would want to make sure that if we're going to go to a phase 1, that it's something that majority of council would be comfortable with.
So we meet monthly and sometimes 2 times a month, and I don't know your plans, but I would think phase 1 would continue for a while. And then if it's a while, month 3 or 4 into it, I would hope, and I would love to get more updates on this COVID, because the paper and the TV's called me, but I really haven't. I don't get those monthly or weekly or daily updates
And
to even know how to
I think we all got in a lull.
Yeah.
When things drop so fast, so well, or so quickly to such low numbers, that we've been doing the monthly updates to council as part of the packet. But I think, you know, Lee and I can have a conversation about maybe doing a week summary or something
Email,
like that, just
yeah.
to see where things have been for the week. But, you know, I think for Beaufort County for a while there, we were looking at like 6, 4 cases a day. And I think, you know, when it's that low, there's comfort.
And I went on the DHEC site yesterday to look, and I noticed, I mean, it's across the state, it seems a little more than us. Even nursing homes, there were only 2 on Hilton Head that had, I think they had 2 cases or 3 cases. It was just, I got used to those numbers more often than monthly, but anyway, that's what my thought would be. You just ask our advice and give it when asked. Else have thoughts, concerns, comments?
My advice, keep watching. Everywhere. The only thing that's going to change that is when people get vaccinated. Not going to pay attention to science and doctors, then we those of us who've been vaccinated, it's not 100% proof that we're not going to be able to get sick. If what they're saying is true, that maybe we won't get as sick or die, we still can spread it to someone else who could be vulnerable.
I think we pulled some numbers together. We'll get those out to you this week, just in preparation and discussion of this, some of the update on the vaccine rates and stuff like that. So we'll get that. We'll get him to send that out maybe tomorrow digitally to council and kind of give you a snapshot of where we're at on a lot of that stuff since his last report.
I've been watching a little bit on TV, and you hear people say when the request comes from government, it's less likely to make an impact as opposed to the private sector. So I say that when I'm about to ask you this. Is there, since we're going to have info on the tables and the scanners, can we have some cards made up about how easy it is to get a vaccine appointment? Is there something we could do to have as a handout for people who may be interested?
I think we can do something like that. I think Lee can probably, I don't think people realize how easy it is to make a vaccine appointment.
Yeah.
They realize
I mean, if you wanted to get one tomorrow, you can have one tomorrow.
We just have a lot of people that aren't going to get them, one way or the other.
We were having a conversation around that the other day, and, you know, I tell people with anything, you always have the the early adopters, the mid adopters, and the late adopters. And what you're seeing now is the early adopters, and it's the mid and late that that's the tipping point. It just takes a while, you know. You never know what's going to trigger them.
Well, the WSAV we should send the video out all over. It was a black couple. The wife was a nurse, and she got her shots, and the man was like, just like you said, Fred, you know, I'm not going to do it for whatever reason. He caught COVID, and they interviewed him, and he could hardly speak because of his oxygen level. And they said, would you now get the shot? He said, I would absolutely get the shot. So I think that's who needs to hear, not you or me or, you know, it's real stories. And I wish we could push that out, because that was
amazing, really.
very influencing to me. I mean, it would have made me get one if I was on the border of it.
Couple locally that happened to.
Need them out there, but
Word of mouth is always the best advertisement for anything that people have questions on.
any other thoughts for Mr. Steese on this? I think it's well thought out.
And again, we're going to be as cautious as we can in August, and we'll see how it goes. And if council wants to pull back, or if there's something that, you know, pushes the wrong way, we can always tweak and make sure that we're doing, make sure we're safe and we're doing what I think people who, you know, come to address council will have the ability to do so, and then everybody else, whether they're here watching or whether they're watching on TV, will have the same experience. But those that are addressing council will have the opportunity to do so. So, felt that was a good thing. So.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we added the formal item back on our workshop from last week's council meeting. It is an item we take action on, and we are, Mr. Finger. Consideration of ordinances related to property commonly referred to as St. Gregory the Great, consisting of approximately 61 acres of land located in 323 Fording Island Road and identified with the tax map numbers that are written. This is final reading, and it consists of 6 sub-items. We did have public hearing. The public hearing occurred and was closed, so now we're just on final reading. Mr. Finger.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We're waiting for some folks in the
there's-
waiting room to join us.
Walter, oh, he's connecting. Walter, you're not muted and you're on video.
Walter, can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay.
I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Talk a
all
little
good.
louder,
Good, thank you.
a little louder.
Mayor and Council, thank you for taking this matter off the table. We were here last Tuesday where you tabled it. During our discussions last week, the 2 primary issues were whether the reduction down to 110 units would stay in place. You recall your first reading approval approved 150 units. Thereafter, the church indicated they would reduce it down to 110. So that was a question whether we were going to stay at 150 or go to 110. The second and more crucial discussion we had last Tuesday was whether our affordable housing ordinance requiring 20% across the board would apply to this project on any multifamily. There is no single family involved in this approval, so you can take single family off the table. We went back and forth a little bit with the church and their representatives last Tuesday about this 20%. You will recall that I thought it was problematic from a legal perspective because the application from the church to annex and these other items all predated us passing our ordinance. The church solved that problem. Mr. Nestor let us know either the Wednesday or Thursday last week that the church agreed that the 20% of our ordinance for affordable housing would apply except for any hotel, because that's commercial, not residential, so it would not apply on any units that were used for the hotel. And Heather, two hotel rooms is one dwelling unit.
Correct.
I said it correctly. So any hotel units that ate up residential density would not have any affordable component to it. And then the church also indicated that they had longstanding plans to do a retired clergy housing. So they asked that the 20% not apply to that component if that was developed down the road. That's where we kind of were at the end of last week, throughout last week, and till today. I have tried to keep you as informed as I could, but let me tell you that you have received probably no more than 10% of the emails that have gone back and forth between staff, the church, and I. One item that did arise, and that I've let you all know about through emails and in my discussions with several of you over the last number of days, is that the church has asked for a reduction in the buffer area on parcel 4. Parcel 4 is the acreage right behind the fire station, and the church has asked that the buffer along the Eagles Point boundary be reduced to 20 feet, and that the buffer behind the fire department be reduced to 10 feet. The Eagles Point buffer is different than most any buffers that we ever look at, because you go to the boundary and you have to go over 600 feet across a fairway at the Eagles Point Golf Course before there's any residential construction. There is no ability to have any residential construction. And again, this is in the county property now, not town property. That there's no possibility currently of there being any residential construction along that boundary because there's golf course there now. The fire station, it would be 10 feet behind that. One of the reasons, as I was told by Mr. Nestor, that the church wanted the buffers to be modified is that if the buffer stayed as is, which was 50 feet, the maximum units that could be put there was 48. If the buffers, and they have been working with, I am told, with an affordable housing developer. There's no guarantee that that deal will happen or that there will be ultimately affordable housing built there, but they have negotiations going on with an affordable housing developer. He said if those buffers were modified, as I just mentioned, down to 20 and 10 feet, they could increase their units there to 60. It is thought, and Walter, make sure I have these numbers correct if you would, that there are longstanding plans for a hotel there which would take up about 60 units of the 150. There is a thought that the retired clergy complex or facility would be about 30 units. So that would take up 90 of the 110, leaving 60 units to put on that 3-acre parcel. They couldn't put them there unless the buffers were done. There's no guarantee that that an affordable housing developer will buy that 3 acres or develop 100% affordable housing on those 3 acres, but there is a possibility, as I am told. So there may be as many as 60 affordable units back there. We do know that the church has agreed whatever's built on that 3 acres will definitely have 20%, which is a much different place than we found ourselves last week at this time. One item of negotiations that I attempted on the town's behalf and the church did not agree to is that I wanted to claw back the buffers. If you don't build 60 back there, we want the buffers to go back to 50 feet. The church was unwilling to agree with that. In conversations with staff and with Stephen, staff and Stephen were very concerned about whether reducing these buffers would create any precedent with other developers in other areas within Buckwalter saying, wait a minute, you did it for the church, why won't you do it for us? And it was my thought that this is such a unique piece of property, this 3 acres, that has no residential anywhere near us along the Eagles Point boundary. And any developer that was going to do anything on this 3-acre parcel would have to really work hard to adequately buffer and screen the boundary behind the fire department. So I thought that this was not something that was going to cause us some kind of precedential problem going forward with other developers. I have drafted a motion, and I've handed it to each of you, that is longer than most motions you will see. It's probably more in depth than you will see. But I can tell you that there was lots of people who provided input to this motion, including staff, Stephen, Mr. Nestor and his client, and myself. I drafted it, and I left out words here and there, and everybody proofread it very well. It is in a portion, it's in a place now where I think it does what council wanted done last week. And the only issue is it does not have the buffer clawback provision. It does not have a guarantee because there's no development plan or any development application right now for what's going to be done in the 3 acres. So there's no guarantee about what will be built back there. But we know that at a bare minimum, if there's any multifamily built back there, it will have to have a minimum of 20% affordable housing. And there is a possibility that it may be much higher than that. And I know that how hard this council has worked over the last, Mr. Hamilton, how many years have we been struggling with affordable housing? Probably 12 or 14, maybe longer. 2005, okay. It presents, I believe, a very legitimate chance for some affordable housing to possibly be built. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Nestor, please, the floor is yours if you'd like to comment in any fashion, or Elaine or anyone else on your behalf.
Tell him to talk. Walter, you need to talk louder. I can't hear you. Try it again.
Can you hear me now?
Hold on. Maybe it's us. Try it again. Try. Talk again.
Okay, is that better? Still not better?
Give us 1 second, Walter, please.
Okay.
While Walter, can I see if council has questions? I know that Walter wants to say anything, but council, do you have initial questions, or do you want Mr. Nestor to reiterate anything, or?
Comment, not a question.
Comment.
Same precedent that came up with the developer, other developers have issues with the buffer, same precedent we're going to set if we don't get affordable housing. So, buffer precedents, housing component.
I'm sorry, Mr. Hamilton, I can't make out what you're saying.
Louder for them to hear. Like, talk more in the microphone. And we hear you fine now, Walter, so.
Thank you.
Try it, just do like a test to see.
Can you hear me, Walter?
Yes, sir.
Walter, I really wasn't talking to you, but I want you to hear it. I was talking to, I was talking to those present with me. When we set the precedence of allowing you to reduce your buffer size, it's the same precedence we're going to send to other developers to say, well, you didn't make them do the affordable housing component. And so it's not a question, it's a statement that I needed to make. I have questions later, but thank you.
Perhaps I can address that. It is the town's PUD ordinance that requires a 50-foot buffer. So and I don't think it's unique to Buckwalter. I believe if a PUD is developed in the town, the exterior boundary has a 50-foot buffer requirement. currently, the buffer requirement with the golf course at Eagles Point and the fire station is 20 and 10 feet respectively. It is because we are going into Buckwalter that we are now, this 50-foot buffer is imposed. And we see it as an opportunity to potentially develop and attract a multifamily housing developer, which would get the town the minimum of 20%. And as Mr. Finger noted, we have over these 3 years been speaking with potential developers. We don't have anybody under contract right now, to my knowledge. We've been speaking with potential developers, and when developers come in, they bring their land planners and their engineers, and they try and fit things. And we, as Mr. Finger noted, we were speaking with an affordable housing developer, and they said our minimum is 60 units, and we can fit 60 units. And then when we said, well, gee, you need to add the 50-foot buffer because we're going into Buckwalter PUD, they said, well, we can't fit 60, we can only fit 48, and we don't think that it's viable. And that's why we were at 110 units was workable for us. Based on those workshops, we went back and sharpened our pencils and said, potentially, what could we get in there? Maybe a hotel. What's the average size of a motel? Maybe some housing, but we can only fit 48. So that's why we were amenable to the request to go down to 110. But this is an opportunity to perhaps get an affordable housing or a multifamily housing developer and get at least a minimum of 20 units of affordable or workforce housing for the town. And we're glad to do that. And I do very much appreciate Mr. Finger's work and the work of town staff, as well as the flexibility of the diocese and the folks that are working on its behalf to come to what I believe, and I hope council believes, is a good resolution. Thank you.
Questions?
Mr. Nestor, Mr. Finger make a strong argument for me. He said that if you don't build the affordable housing unit, then we have a callback. So that gives us some leverage to say you're going to, the developer will consider building these units. Because if not, if they don't build it, if we give you the setback or the reduction in the buffers, and you don't build the units, then we're not getting anything for our efforts. We're not giving anything for being generous in that exchange.
Statement or question?
Question.
Well, I do understand, Mr. Hamilton, but it really puts us in a box, and it's not a comfortable place for us because we don't know. We really do not know what is going to go on any of these out parcels, and if it is we want to maintain that flexibility. Because it could be a hotel, it could be a retirement home for clergy, it could be something else that provides the opportunity for the diocese to use the property as it sees fit. I think the most probable use would be for a multifamily, because multifamily developers have looked at that property, and specifically that property. But again, we don't know what the future holds in there, and that's why we were seeking that kind of flexibility. And I would add that pursuant to the town's UDO, any prospective developer would need to go back in front of the Planning Commission for their site development plan review and in front of town staff, and that process would be an opportunity for the town to look at the potential use to seek to get additional buffers or additional fencing.
Can we move on and come back? Just, okay. Larry, and you're up.
Walter, I just got a couple of questions for you. Just off the cuff, how many clergy or retired nuns or whatever units do y'all anticipate building? I know there's got to be like some idea whether you're talking about 10 or 50, just a general idea.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we honestly have no idea. I mean, I think that the attractiveness of something like that is no different than the attractiveness of living in the town of Bluffton for anybody else. So I wouldn't anticipate that it would be limited to clergy from the, clergy or other staff of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Charleston. It might be much larger than that. So I'm sorry, but I don't really have any way to attempt to quantify that. And I do want to be clear that we don't know. We've tried to express to you the range of things that we've done, but we don't really know, because we didn't know during this 3-year process if we were going to be in or not going to be in. The one contract that we did have has fallen out. So we don't really have anything active, but we have ideas, and we have to, because we are going into Buckwalter as opposed to general commercial, we have to in our minds try to envision what might go there, because in Buckwalter, land and density or development rights are separate. So just because you buy a piece of land doesn't mean you get development rights. So in this process, we have tried to say internally and with staff, gee, what's possible to go there? And that's why we've come up with the uses that we've looked at and the densities. But we wanted to be able to reserve certain things that have been discussed by the diocese, and a retirement home for clergy is one of them. But I can't predict, nor can I quantify whether or not that will happen, or how many people that would include.
Well, I appreciate your effort, and I'm trying to look at it with an open mind, just do my job, as a representative of the people of Bluffton, and going by what we, trying to make sure we treat everyone fair. So we're on the same page. I'm just trying to answer my question as, if we use 60 units for a 120-room hotel, and you build, say, 40 for clergy uses, that leaves 50. So why would we need 60? The buffers to allow 60 if you can't, the 150 dwellings would be gone. So I'm just trying to look at that and say, and also could use some clarification when you said that possibly the hotel would go on that 3 acres. Is that still part of it? I was under the impression that there would be 10 point something acres of commercial property that I was thinking would probably be the other side of the property, or road front, or whatever. So I'm just, I'm just thinking about all those hypothetical situations and just trying to get, make sense of it. So when I vote, I feel good that I ask everything I should have.
Yes, sir, and I appreciate that. And just for clarification, there's a 2.94 acre parcel that's directly behind the firehouse. As you drive in St. Gregory the Great Drive at the firehouse, and you're driving towards the parish or the church, the land between US 278 right-of-way and St. Gregory the Great Drive, there are parcels laid out. 2.92 acres, 2.45 acres, and 2.34 acres. So those 4 parcels, one immediately behind the fire department or the fire station, and then 3 lots along US 278 to the south of St. Gregory the Great Drive as you enter into the property. That St. Gregory the Great Drive is owned by Beaufort County. It's a public right-of-way all the way through to the stop sign. All the property to the south between St. Gregory the Great Drive and US 278 right-of-way. Those 4 parcels, that's what we're considering for the out parcel. Everything else, the remaining 50-plus acres is all institutional use and wetlands. So it would only be a use in those 4 out parcels, and we can't say. We're doing the same thing that you're doing, Mr. Toomer. We've been trying for 3 years to figure out who, what, and where, and that's what we've come up with, and that's why we do that process in the workshop to come up with, and thank you. There's the.
Yeah, I just brought it up too.
Okay, I was not clear on that, the 4, that, the one, I thought the one behind the firehouse was not, but I see it now. Okay.
Thank you, Heather.
That
for pulling up.
answers my questions. So basically, we could get 12, the way I'm doing these numbers, we could get 12 affordable houses if you build 60, or we'll get 8 if you build 48.
Well, Mr. Toomer,
Or we could get all 60 if you really do a good job, right?
Right.
well, of course, we don't know. So a multifamily developer may come in and say, I want out parcel 3 and out parcel 2. And that gives them a little over 6 acres, or a little shy of 6 acres. And they might be able to fit more. So, and that's what we're trying to anticipate and protect. And so if there's if a hotel goes on out parcel 4 and a multifamily development goes on the other 3, there would be more. I mean, you'd get a larger percentage of affordable workforce housing, because the 20% minimum would apply. It's only out parcel 4 that has the exterior 50-foot PUD buffer, and that's what we're trying to deal with. And again, hopefully this discussion has exemplified, that it is a little difficult because we don't know. It's hard to predict the future, but we're trying to provide an opportunity not only for the diocese but also for the town, because the affordable workforce housing is certainly something that the diocese supports.
Thank you.
And maybe to help with that, and thank you, Heather, I was looking for it on my meeting thing. I like the aerial because I see the golf course, and it's really heavily treed on the Eagles Point side. So they have a thick buffer. Our buffer, I'm sure, would be undisturbed buffer. So it really does make a thicker one. And I guess I take from this, we were able to get our ordinance that was passed in June. That's a good precedent to set, that we have this ordinance in place. This 20% of whatever's built will be affordable. So it really does push our initiatives forward and sets a good precedent, I think. So I don't know if that helped you or not. Dan, you have a question?
Your statement, I agree with you. This is the 20% that we've been after from the get-go. Walter just did clear up something I was going to ask, but this 20%, like you said, Walter, if for some reason parcel 4 is not the one where multifamily goes and it's 3, 2, and 1, the 20% still applies to all 4 pieces.
Any multifamily housing that's developed would get the minimum 20% affordable / workforce housing applied to it in accordance with the ordinance, the UDO amendment that was passed in 2020. Yes, sir.
And to Mr. Hamilton's comments, and Terry Fingers, I wouldn't want to give up the buffers unless we had affordable housing there, because of the precedent setting that we would be doing. And I get your point. From the Beaufort County perspective, you're already at a smaller buffer area, and you have to have the the smaller buffer area maintained in order to get more units in there. So, I can live with a little bit of a trade-off, because we have been trying so hard for so many years. If it gives us a handful, 2 or 3 or 4 more affordable housing units to trade off the buffer, I'm good with that.
Let me ask Bridget, did you have any other questions, Dan?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Did you have any questions, Bridget? I've already spoken my thoughts on the
tell you that
20%, and I don't know if anyone else had follow-up.
The draft motion that you have in front of you, I believe, includes all of the points that have been raised by council, negotiated with the church, and agreed to by the church. Happy to go over the motion if you'd like me to, but this is probably draft number 12. Would that be about right, Walter?
Well, I think it's thorough, and sometimes it has to be long, but there leaves no loopholes or confusion. And I know I complain about agenda language being long, but this might be something we need to really focus on our future changes to make it
You
really
let
clear.
two lawyers get involved in drafting a motion, you're going to get a long motion. And that doesn't count a lane. So if you have three lawyers, you're going to get a long motion. So we try to cover all the bases for you.
Would y'all have this in front of you? Do y'all want to take a minute, because you got it right at council? Do you want to read it? Do you want Terry to read it while you listen and follow? What's the best way? I want Fred's just finishing up. The scroll. If you get it on one screen, you're a. Well, while we're trying to get it on the screen, Walter, I would ask you to get with the diocese to see if this goes forward, to work with our Affordable Housing Committee. I think we have tools in our toolbox that could encourage somebody to do more than what they're going to be required to do. And also, if it's somebody who's interested in affordable housing, I think Mayor Pro Tem and Dan are on the committee. They are eager to find developers who truly believe in our mission, which is creating what the rest of the country doesn't seem to be able to create. So please take that back and see if we can't partner in other ways. Maybe there's someone that could look on other properties and we could connect them. So maybe we can make their life very happy in the Low Country, if you would do so.
Thank you, Mayor. And absolutely, and that the start of this process was that the Catholic Diocese of Charleston and St. Gregory the Great, specifically St. Gregory the Great Parish Church, wanted to be the Catholic Church in the town of Bluffton. And we hope that we can do that. And in large part is because so many of the charities and so many of the missions of the church are Bluffton focused and Bluffton centric. And we believe that housing is one of them.
Any other questions? There is a motion. Does anyone want to read it? Do you want me to read it? All right, read fast. Okay. Zero.
Volunteer.
Don't adjourn me. Is there a motion to approve on final reading the ordinance approving the annexation petition on St. Gregory Catholic Church property as it meets all the legal and procedural requirements, and the annexation will be of benefit to the town and applicant? I further move that in conjunction with and predicated on the annexation being approved, that we approve formal agenda items 4.1A through F and item 4.2 with the conditions set out in this motion. On the approval of the initial master plan, this approval is by a single vote and does not involve a second reading. This motion specifically confirms that the public hearing had already occurred on July 13th, 2021, and that conditions set out below are minor changes after first reading and do not necessitate the agenda items going back to Planning Commission or require a new first reading. The conditions are: number one, the residential development rights will remain at 150 as approved at first reading, with the prior condition that the residential dwelling rights do not include single family. Number two, section 4213G of the Unified Development Ordinance applies a minimum of 20% of the multifamily residential dwelling units constructed are to be affordable workforce housing. Any affordable workforce housing will follow the general standards as outlined in Article 6.5 Workforce Affordable Housing of the UDO. The minimum 20% affordable workforce residential dwelling units does not apply to residential development rights used for lodging, hotel. Number 4, the minimum 20% affordable workforce residential dwelling units does not apply to group home, assisted living with or without a certificate of need, or for retired clergy, nuns, or church personnel. The out parcel 4 behind the fire station will have a 20-foot undisturbed buffer along the property line with Eagles Point Golf Course rear buffer and a 10-foot buffer along the property line with the fire station side buffer. These modified buffers are granted at the request of the applicant in order to, among other things, enhance the possibility for development of multifamily housing and thereby provide affordable workforce housing as contemplated in Section 4.2.13.g of the UDO. These modified buffers are granted due to the factually unique location of out parcel 4. The boundary with Eagles Point Golf Course rear buffer has no residential development adjacent to it, with the nearest home being over 600 feet away, and the buffer along the fire station property will need to be adequately buffered by the ultimate developer in order to screen the multifamily units from the fire station.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second? Is there
Second.
any discussion? Very much protects this town. I know why you read, as I read it, it made some sense on precedent and otherwise. Any other discussion
That motion was long enough.
on breakfast? Any other discussion? All in favor, say by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That's unanimous. Welcome to the town.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please follow up with us on the affordable housing, and let's see how we can really make a super home run with this.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, council.
Thank you. Okay, I've read all my motions for the year. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I make that motion.
We're done.
Sherry.
Lord, we need